Hey, welcome back to our Journey with Jesus Bible study, where we're going through the Bible chronologically in a year using the Bible Recap Study Plan by Tara Lee Cobble. Today is day 24, and we are going through Genesis chapter 35 through 37. At the beginning of 35, we see God confirming his covenant with Jacob, telling him to go up to Bethel and make an altar. But first, he's got to purify his people. He tells him in verse 2 to put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. And so we will see this as a theme. And I think it's in Exodus, whenever they're at Mount Sinai, God tells Moses to tell them to wash their clothes, purify themselves, and that's before he can come dwell with them. And so this is kind of a foreshadowing in a sense of that, but you kind of see everything kind of move towards that kind of thing. And we see as they're moving towards Bethel, as God commanded them to do, in verse 5, it says, as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And so we just see God's protection. And it's so encouraging to know that if God is calling you to that, and God knew this would be a dangerous area potentially for them, or that there may be potential confrontation there, God protected them. He made everybody scared of them. And we will see that throughout the Old Testament too, where God will make other people do something, make them scared of the people that he is trying to protect. And I just think that's very interesting. And then we move to it makes a small statement about Deborah, who was Rebecca's nurse. And my commentary had mentioned something about potentially being maybe Deborah was Rebecca's nurse that she sent with him whenever she sent him to Laban. We don't know that, but it just gives you a hint here. And so when Jacob goes up to Bethel, where God told him to go, and he commanded him to make an altar, well, God confirms his covenant with Jacob, and he starts reiterating the fact that you are no longer Jacob, you are Israel. I am going to make you a nation. He is the new heir to the divine promise given to Abraham. He tells him that nations and a company of nations will come from you. Kings will come from you. And so in that place where God met him, Jacob set up a pillar. And not only a pillar this time, but he presented an offering. He poured an offering on it. And this is significant because he has set up pillars in the past, and then to commemorate or to show where something happened. And then he set up an altar in our previous chapters we read. But this time he puts an offering. He pours an offering over the pillar as an act of worship. And I looked up worship offerings, and it means it's meant for worship and thanksgiving. And so he here is worshiping him and thanking him for this. And then it recounts we are told that Rachel has another son. His name is, she says Ben-Ami. I know Ben-Ani, maybe that's it. But Israel, Jacob, says his name will be Benjamin. She dies during childbirth. And he sets up a pillar to mark where her death happened and where she was buried. And then we see Reuben. It's one little sentence, but it will have huge consequence for Reuben, where he sleeps with Bilhah, Israel's concubine, and some of his brother's mom. And we will see, I think it's in chapter 49, that this is going to have a huge consequence for him and his inheritance later. We move to chapter 36, where it talks about Esau and his descendants and kind of what happens with his line. Again, we see where Esau took Canaanite wives, and this was explicitly against Rebekah and Isaac's instructions. They had forbidden it. If you remember, it was said that, I can't remember what wife it was, but it said that it made life hard for Rebekah. And this had to have been because she was just so against, they were all against it. And then in verse 6, at the second part of verse 6, it says, he went into a land away from his brother Jacob, for their possessions were too great for them to dwell together because of their livestock. So this was a big land. Like, Canaan was not, let's see what it said. I mean, it doesn't say specifically how big it was, but it was a huge land, and it just really shows how much wealth and prosperity these two brothers had. And the fact that Esau, this really shows him being, how he really had a conversion of heart too, where he willingly kind of left. You know, we don't really know exactly all of the things that went on in there, but it doesn't say that they got into an argument or a fight. And so we're led to believe that this was a not anything that had an argument or anything attached to it. And so we see growth on Esau's part, and the very fact of how large both of their wealth had gotten. And so in verse 31, so after that we go through and it shows all of the chiefs and all the different generations of Esau. And we see that Esau settled in Seir, which would then become Edom. And then in verse 31, it says, these are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king's rule reigned over the Israelites. This was notable because the nation of Israel would not have kings for some time. A lot of the nations around them would have them, but they were ruled by judges before they would be ruled by a king. And in Samuel, we'll see this is where that's where they get a king. But God is kind of like, no, you know, Samuel is through Samuel is warning them, you don't want this. This is not good. But God, they demanded it, and God gave it to them. And we will see kind of how that ends up. And then in chapter 37, we are introduced to Joseph and his story. This is a pivotal moment in the future of Jacob and his family, and in the future of the Israelites. This is a huge moment for them. We've seen hints in previous chapters that Joseph kind of got preferential treatment in a sense, like because Rebekah got preferential treatment, so did Joseph. And him and Benjamin were, it says that God loved Joseph more than any of his other brothers. And that was because he was the firstborn of Rebekah, and he loved Rebekah. And so we see this is kind of coming home to roost, that if you show one sibling preferential treatment, he's going to start feeling like he's preferred, right? And then all of his other siblings were jealous of that, and they knew that the father preferred him, and so they treated him like that. Now, Joseph didn't do any favors for himself when he's telling them of their dreams, and it's kind of like, hey, you're all going to bow down to me. And then he even tells his dad, I had this dream where behold, the sun, the moon, and the star, 11 stars were bowing down to me. And Jake was kind of like, so you're telling me your mother and your brothers, so me, your mother, and your brothers will be bowing down to you? And he's like, okay. But then he kept that in mind. And so, one of the things too, is this might not have been written in chronological order, because with the inclusion of his mother there, according to what we previously learned, she had passed away. And so this could have just been, you never know when all of this was kind of laid out. But I thought that was interesting that it included the mom in there when she had already passed away. But we'll see how his brother, Israel, sends him sends Joseph to check on his brothers in the field. He's just wanting to know how they are. Well, Joseph comes and they're like, let's kill him. And Reuben's kind of like, how about we not? And he's like, why don't we just put him in a pit? And Reuben was thinking, if we put him in a pit, I'll come and get him later. This will get out of their system. It'll be fine. Well, Judah says, well, let's sell him. What profit if we just kill him? Let's put him in a pit and sell him. And so they sell him to the Midianites for 20 shekels of silver. This kind of made me think of Jesus and how I think it was 30 pieces of silver that he was sold for. And so Reuben apparently was not here during that time. And Reuben is kind of like, wait, what happened to my brother? He starts tearing his clothes. He's so worried about him. And the other brothers take his coat of many colors, as we've heard referenced to Joseph before, and dip it in blood and go show Jacob, Israel, that he's dead. You know, they want him gone. They want his dad to believe that. And we see that Jacob, he believes it. And he says, then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned his son for days. And in my commentary, it talks about how tearing your clothes is a visible sign of intense anguish and pain. And then putting on the sackcloth is a common mourning custom to them. And so he was so sad and he was missing him so much. And then it even talks about, I shall go down to Sheol. Sheol, it had the idea of death. They really didn't understand heaven and hell at this point. And so that's the term that they used for death. That's all that they could think of, was that he's dead. And Jacob was kind of like, I will join him there. That's how much he loved him and missed him. I thought it was interesting in verse 35. It says, all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. We only know about one daughter, but this is daughters plural. So I did a little bit of research. In chapter 46 of Genesis, we'll see that he has 33 children mentioned in there. It could be granddaughters, could be grandsons. It could all be his grandchildren. But at this point, it says daughters. So we only know 13 names of his children, but I thought that was worth mentioning. We will get on into Genesis tomorrow, and with Judah and Tamar and Joseph and Potiphar's wife. That Potiphar is the one that the Midianites sold Joseph to in Egypt, and that was the Pharaoh's officer at the time. And the Pharaoh is kind of like almost like it would be, we have a president. The Pharaoh would be, that's not his name. We will see several different pharaohs, like we have several different presidents. I learned that. So I thought that was, I always wondered why it was Pharaoh. And I'm like, well, there's pharaohs all throughout. And how many years is this? So anyway, share something that you learned about God, or something that you learned in these 3 chapters that maybe you hadn't seen or known before. And we'll be back tomorrow. Have a good day.